They introduced him like he was the messiah of manufacturing. Colin Braxton, new production director, fresh off some high-growth plant overseas, armed with glossy presentations and numbers that made the boardroom drool. Optimized output by 41%, they said. Streamlined operations without sacrificing compliance. But no one asked what kind of compliance and whose definition of streamlined. I'd been with the company for over 9 years, lead inspector at the final quality control stage, where every vehicle passed through one last set of hands before hitting the market. Mine were those hands. I'd flagged faulty sensors, misaligned braking systems, even micro-fractures in frame welds. People called me obsessive. But I slept at night. Colin didn't like that. On his second day, he summoned department heads and declared, "Efficiency is our new priority. Some of our inspection protocols are unnecessarily cautious." I should have seen it then. The setup. Within a week, 3 verification steps were removed from the inspection process, quietly, without official documentation. I noticed when a batch of SUVs failed torque verification, but the line didn't stop. The log showed passed, but I hadn't cleared them. I stopped the batch, issued a formal freeze, and routed it for rechecks. 52 vehicles halted. That afternoon, Colin called me in. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "We're streamlining. Your role no longer aligns with our operational model. This is your termination notice." No prior warning, no misconduct, just a stack of papers, 2 HR reps, and a security guard waiting by the door. I walked out in silence. Later that day, Colin stood on the factory floor giving a motivational speech about lean thinking and realigning legacy systems. The crew clapped. He beamed. I watched from the gates, fingers tight around the sealed envelope that ended nearly a decade of work. But before leaving, I made sure to back up everything. Inspection logs, flagged issues, date stamps, emails, even screenshots of internal dashboards. I wasn't out for revenge, but I knew what I'd seen. And I knew what Colin had done. Maybe the world hadn't caught up to him yet. But it would. Being fired wasn't what broke me. It was the silence afterward. No calls, no messages. Not even from the people I used to eat lunch with every day. I had become radioactive, just a problem Colin had removed for the greater good. The factory spun on without me, louder and faster than before. My name was no longer mentioned, only whispered. At home, my wife tried to stay strong, but I saw it in her eyes, the questions she didn't ask. My daughter overheard a neighbor say I'd messed something up. She came to me that night and asked if I had done anything wrong. I told her the truth. No, I just did my job too well. Still, doubt crept in like rust. Had I been too strict? Too unyielding? Maybe I could have let a few things slide. But then I'd remember the crash photos I'd once seen. Victims of faulty airbags, brake failures, cracked welds. Those were real people, real lives. So no. I hadn't been too strict. I had done what was right, and I wasn't going to sit in that silence forever. I set up a secure drive and uploaded everything I had saved. Every inspection log, every discrepancy, every override Colin had issued, signed, time-stamped. I still had my company login for a few more hours after I was escorted out. I used that window to download logs from the final assembly line, the ones they didn't think I'd check. I wrote a formal memo and sent it to the internal ethics office. No response. Then to HR. Silence. A week passed, then another, then came the news article. New production director leads company to record-breaking output. Complete with a photo of Colin shaking hands with executives in front of the latest SUV model, the same model I'd flagged for faulty calibration. My hands tightened around my coffee mug. I knew what was coming. The cars I tried to stop were now on the streets, and Colin was smiling like nothing could touch him. But some things don't fade away. Truth doesn't dissolve. It waits. So did I. The first one made local news. A father and his teenage son dead on impact. Their SUV slammed into a guardrail when the brake assist failed on a mountain road. A freak accident, the report said. A tragic malfunction. I watched the footage in my living room. The vehicle model, ours. Same batch. Same week I had flagged those torque anomalies. My stomach twisted, but I said nothing. Not yet. 3 days later came another crash. This time a school teacher in Ohio, airbag deployed late, neck snapped instantly, then another. A nurse in Arizona crushed when her car veered unexpectedly during a high-speed merge. All different states. Same vehicle line. I knew the pattern before the journalist did, each one connected to the batch I had frozen. The batch Colin pushed out, quietly approved, silently shipped. Then the media frenzy began. Are these SUVs safe? Manufacturer faces scrutiny amid series of fatal accidents. Calls grow for nationwide recall. The company tried to stay ahead of the fire. Press releases. Legal deflection. We are investigating. We value safety above all. But the damage had already been done. Then came the inevitable. A massive recall announcement. Every unit from the disputed production month. Over 12,000 vehicles pulled from the roads. Estimated losses in the hundreds of millions. Stock price plummeted overnight. And then in a press conference, I saw the moment I'd been waiting for. Colin stepped up to the microphone, his voice calm, practiced. We have reason to believe this issue may have originated in the quality control stage, he said. The final inspector responsible for that batch is no longer with the company. He didn't say my name, but I felt the bullet land. I was no longer just forgotten. I was being framed. That night, my daughter came into my study. Her face was pale. Dad, were those crashes your fault? I stared at her for a long moment, and then I shook my head. No, I said. But now it's time the world knows that too. I opened my laptop, entered my password, and brought up the folder labeled failsafes. Inside were the files that could burn down the lie Colin had built. And this time I wasn't going to stay silent. By morning my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails, texts, missed calls from reporters, old co-workers, even a lawyer from corporate. They all wanted statements, interviews, comments. I gave none. There was no point arguing with a machine that had already decided I was the problem. The headlines now included my name. Former Inspector may have missed key defects. Whistleblower or scapegoat. Ex-employee at center of recall storm. Lawsuit filed against retired quality inspector. Yes, they filed a lawsuit. Negligence, dereliction of duty, damages pending further investigation. I sat in my kitchen with the notice in hand, staring at my name printed next to words like reckless and liable. My wife said nothing. She just placed a steaming cup of tea beside me, her hands trembling slightly. I hadn't broken. Not at the factory, not when they fired me. But that moment cracked something. It wasn't just my reputation they were trying to destroy. It was my livelihood, my family, my future. And the worst part? They were winning. Neighbors avoided us, my daughter's schoolmates whispered. My old manager texted me, "Oh, sorry man, I can't get involved." I didn't blame them. Colin had built a wall of clean press and legal protection. I was just the shadow he painted guilt onto. But shadows move. That evening I revisited the files. I still had them all: inspection logs, override signatures, internal memos with time-stamped approvals. I'd even saved the access log of Colin's override, proof he had personally cleared the batch I had frozen. But I needed more than just documents. I needed someone from inside, someone who saw what I saw and knew what Colin did. Then I remembered. Raj. He was an old colleague from IT who'd left quietly last year, smart, discreet, and once told me, "If they ever come for you, I've got your back. Just say the word." I opened my contacts, scrolled until I found his number, and typed one word. Now. Raj responded in 5 minutes flat. A simple text. "Come to the back lot. No phones." I knew what that meant. He was still cautious, even out of the system. Smart man. He always said companies don't collapse from outside threats, but from the quiet sins buried deep inside their servers. We met behind a storage unit he was renting outside town. He looked the same. Calm eyes, always watching more than he spoke. "You kept the logs?" he asked, unlocking a dusty cabinet. "I kept everything." He nodded once. "Good. Because I've got more." Inside the cabinet was an old server tower and a stack of encrypted drives. Raj had spent his last few months at the company quietly mirroring internal systems. For practice, he claimed. Turned out he'd accidentally kept more than he ever meant to. He slid a drive into his laptop, tapped a few keys, and pulled up a dashboard that made my heart jump. A full internal audit trail, Colin's override orders, access timestamps, video footage of line workers hesitating, then shrugging as they skipped the required tests. And then, the smoking gun. A memo Colin had sent to the shift supervisor. Unofficial, off-platform, but archived nonetheless. "Push them through, we'll smooth over QC later, no time for paranoia." My chest tightened. I hadn't just been ignored, I'd been overruled, deliberately, systematically. We spent the next 6 hours cataloging everything. Raj wrote a full chain of custody report and notarized every file. I emailed a copy to my lawyer, then created 2 offline backups, one in a sealed envelope, the other in a deposit box across town. By midnight, we sat in silence. Raj looked at me and asked, "You ready to blow this up?" I didn't hesitate. "Number, I'm ready to tell the truth, and let it do the rest." The next morning, I requested a hearing with the court, countersuit for defamation and wrongful prosecution. At the same time, I sent an anonymous tip to the local press and a private email to a member of the company's board I once trusted. It was time to let the fire start, on my terms. The courtroom smelled like disinfectant and polished lies. Colin sat across from me, slick as ever in a tailored navy suit, flanked by 2 attorneys who looked like they'd been trained to smile without blinking. He didn't even glance my way. Why would he? In his mind, I was already buried, a liability tossed to the wolves to preserve his career. The judge called the room to order. My attorney began with a simple statement. "We're not here to argue theory, we're here to present facts." Colin's side opened with confidence. Charts, timelines, a spreadsheet showing how my oversights lined up with the defective batch. They painted me as careless, even unstable. I kept my eyes on the judge, not flinching, not reacting. Then it was our turn. We started with the logs. Raj's audit trail matching time codes with override approvals. Then the memo, Colin's direct instruction to bypass full testing. You could feel the air shift in the room. But the moment that broke him was the video, a grainy security recording from the factory floor. A line worker pausing at a failed brake test, checking his terminal, then receiving a clear to proceed ping. Seconds later, a voice from the intercom, Colin's voice, saying, "We're behind target. Keep it moving." Gasps, whispering. The judge asked for silence. Colin leaned forward, whispering urgently to his lawyers. Then the board email. The one I'd sent privately to Ms. Hallberg, the only board member who once praised my work ethic. She was in the courtroom. She stood up. "I'd like to testify," she said. Colin's lawyers objected. The judge allowed it. Ms. Hallberg spoke with a calm, steady voice. "We were never told about these overrides. Colin assured us quality control had signed off. This changes everything." The judge ordered an immediate recess and an emergency review of the company's internal documentation. Outside, the press had gathered. Microphones, flashes, questions, but I said nothing. Colin passed by me, face pale, jaw tight. He didn't speak either. But I looked him in the eye, for the first time in months, and saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Colin was arrested 2 days later. The charges: gross negligence, falsification of safety records, obstruction of internal audits, and corporate liability in relation to the wrongful deaths linked to the defective vehicles. The news broke like a tidal wave. Media outlets who once hinted I was the problem now rushed to rewrite the narrative. Fired inspector was right all along. Whistleblower cleared as executive faces criminal charges. My inbox flooded with apologies from old colleagues, from people who had avoided me, from strangers who had watched their loved ones get into those very SUVs. But I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. The company reached out to make amends. Public relations, damage control, of course, but it came with real offers. The board offered to reinstate me, not to the same job, but something bigger. Director of Product Integrity with full autonomy over safety protocols. Reporting directly to the board, not production. I turned it down. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because I didn't want to work in the shadows of men like Colin anymore. I had no interest in title or spotlight. What I asked for instead was simple. Give me a clean lab, a small team, and the freedom to design a safety program that can't be bypassed. They agreed. Over the next few months, I helped rebuild the heart of the company, the part no one sees, the part that saves lives. I rehired a few old names, trained young inspectors who didn't yet understand why saying no might one day cost them their job, but could save someone's life. Raj came on board as cybersecurity lead. Together we built a logging system no executive could manipulate, no shortcut could erase. I made sure every test left a trail, every override lit up like a warning flare. We weren't chasing perfection, we were protecting trust. One day, a young inspector asked me, "Why didn't you just walk away? You were already proven right." I looked at her and said, "Being right isn't enough. You have to rebuild what was broken, especially if no one else will." 1 year later, I stood at the edge of the memorial. A small plaque bore the names of the victims, fathers, mothers, children. People who trusted us, people we failed. I didn't come to apologize. I had done everything I could. I came to honor them. The wind was quiet that morning. A few families were gathered. One woman approached me, middle-aged, hands trembling slightly as she held a photograph. "My husband," she said softly. "He died in the second crash. I wanted to hate you. I really did." I nodded. There were no words I could offer that would undo her loss. But then she said something that caught me off guard. "I read everything after the truth came out. I know what you tried to stop, what you stood for. He'd want me to say thank you." Her voice cracked on the last syllable. I just stood there letting it settle deep in my chest. Later that day I returned to the plant, not as a manager or engineer but as a quiet observer. The line ran slower now. Every 10th car was pulled for full diagnostics. Inspectors carried checklists like surgeons. No one cut corners. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. I walked past the new Product Integrity Center. A plaque beside the door read, "Built on accountability. Sustained by truth." They didn't put my name on it. I preferred it that way. That night I sat on my back porch watching my daughter chase fireflies. She laughed like nothing had ever been wrong. My wife leaned against me, a silent reminder that I hadn't lost everything when they tried to destroy me. "Do you feel better now?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, and then I said, "I don't feel victorious. Just clean. Like I finally washed the stain off my name." The truth had taken time. It had cost me friends, reputation, peace of mind. But it had also returned everything that mattered. In the end, I didn't win by fighting louder. I won by never letting go of who I was, even when the world tried to rewrite me. Sometimes the quietest stand leaves the deepest mark.